lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And after 7 months, we are back with another double feature, covering a couple of movies chock full of man-eaters. First up is the shark attack serial killer piece of Aussie horror, Dangerous Animals. And we'll end off the episode with last week's big release, a zombie sequel 23 years in the making. 28 years later. So if you want to hear us talk about one but not the other, be sure to use the podcast chapters to help navigate our discussion. So without further ado, Dangerous Animals was released June 6, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, we meant to cover this one weeks ago on the show, but I know we had a couple of scheduling issues, and we figured why not delay it because we just couldn't pass up the opportunity to discuss a new shark movie on the show. Are you familiar with this director's previous work, and were you looking forward to Dangerous Animals?
Yeah, so obviously when I saw his first film, The Loved Ones, I wasn't like making a connection. Oh, this guy did this movie or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing The Loved Ones when did that come out? When did that come out? 2009. I would have been like fresh out of high school, like 4 years out of high school. Jesus, I'm old. But like I remember seeing this and really liking it. I just remember it was like fantastic. His other one, The Devil's Candy, I don't think I fully has seen it. I think I watched it on like Netflix like years and years and years ago, but like something happened, I had to go somewhere and I paused it and I just never came back to it and just forgot about it. But I feel like I remember people like liking that one, and I remember what I saw, I did enjoy it. So I was kind of excited, especially with The Loved Ones. I was like, oh, this is the Loved Ones guy. Like, let's fucking go. I'm ready. What about you? Like, are you familiar with the director?
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I didn't watch The Loved Ones as it came out. I was still in high school at the time in 2009. But I happened to check out The Loved Ones and The Devil's Candy back-to-back one evening there, nice. I think in 2016, 2017. And essentially after seeing them, I enjoyed them both so much that I'd periodically check in and see, okay, is Sean Byrne making anything else? And he's one of those filmmakers that's a little bit of a recluse. He's hard to kind of get a read on online. He never does like any real interviews or no real news crops up of what he's doing. So when the trailer for this, dropped in front of Drop earlier this year, I was absolutely shocked that he basically is coming back with a shark attack serial killer movie 10 years after his previous thing. So, as I mentioned before on the show, I have a love of creature features or animal attack horror just because that's kind of what I grew up with as a child in terms of the horror genre. It was basically all I was allowed to watch. So I was really excited to see a director that I thoroughly enjoyed his previous 2 other movies tackle the subject matter.
You were excited that you were like, so finally a director that knows what the people want, and they want a shark movie.
And Jai Courtney dancing around in his boxers as a drunk, weird serial killer.
Listen, whenever we awkwardly place in our theater experience in this, the stories I have to tell.
All right. Well, let's just get into it then. So is this shark attack movie dead in the water? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
All right, crew. There's still one thing we need to take care of. Big, deep inhale. Welcome aboard. I love fighters. Tell me that ain't the greatest show on earth. Every fisherman loves a good fight.
Dangerous Animals was directed by Sean Byrne and written by Nick Leppard, and the story is as follows. When Zephyr, a savvy and free-spirited surfer, is abducted by a shark-obsessed serial killer and held captive on his boat, she must figure out how to escape before he carries out a ritualistic feeding to the sharks below. Now, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Dangerous Animals?
Let me just clear my throat here. Let's fucking go.
Okay, all right. Big fan of Baby Shark, are you?
Yeah, Baby Shark. Let's go. This, you know what? Like, this was so refreshing, I feel, to like everything, like years of what we've been watching for Now Slains or like even the main episodes. Just like, I just think it's interesting because, you know, I've been a proponent of Jason Statham punching sharks in the face and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But, you know, those are, especially something like as big as the Meg was, like, the Meg's really cusping the horror line there of like, it's not real, you know, it's a shark, but, you know, it's still Jason Statham just punching animals in the face, essentially. There's not a lot of horror to it. And I just, like, to me, I remember I seen this trailer. I remember you and me just being pumped for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really thinking, I don't know the last time that hype has, like, matched my experience watching this, where I was just, I thought it looked good. I thought the performances were good. This movie, like, knew what it was. It didn't try to be anything else. And I just think it was a good time at the theater for horror fans, you know, watching just the absurdity of this movie. Because it, like, the further it goes, the more absurd it just gets, and it gets wilder and wilder. And obviously, Courtney's performance is just, like, also gets wilder and wilder.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, maybe I was like, when's the last time I've seen an actor, like, have this much fun just playing, like, a crazy guy? Like, this is, like, Nick Cage levels of, like, just giving yourself up to the material.
It's definitely an over-the-top, fully committed performance that, like, Jai Courtney was like, oh, I'm not in, like, my superhero bod anymore, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of out here, you know, just dancing around, having fun, just kind of like this crazed, like, egomaniac to a certain degree that you can just tell that he's fully enjoying this, you know, being here and working on this movie. For me, it's interesting. I think initially you seem just a lot more positive on the movie than I am. Mostly just because for me, I felt like this movie was like so close a lot of the time to being great is how I felt when I was watching it. Like, you talked about like how the sharks look good, or, you know, the visual effect. We never mentioned visual effects, but for me, as I was watching it, the cold open, just to spoil it a little bit, I guess, it involves kind of like a shark cage dive, you know, and when they go underwater, I just found like the lighting looked really bad. I thought the sharks looked really bad. It was the sort of thing that right off the bat, it kind of made the movie feel a little cheap to me. And then that kind of extends to the rest of the movie in terms of the VFX, at least, where, you know, the sharks, the helicopters, the boats, the digidoubles, when, you know, they're involved in death scenes and whatnot. In my experience, or in, you know, when I was watching it, I thought they all just looked really terrible. But what made this opening scene, you know, this cold open hurt even more for me was just, there is loads of stock footage of sharks in shark cages that you could have pulled from to make this sequence work a little bit better. You know, we have Shark Week every week that, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 days worth of people diving, getting footage like this. And the fact was they just chose, I think based off what I saw, it looked like just a lot of digital creations that, you know, kind of made the movie start off kind of on the wrong foot to me. And then additionally, I would say, like, the pacing of some of this action horror felt a little bit off. Once again, I'm just going to talk about the cold open because we're in the spoiler-free thoughts. But what you might expect is someone's going to die, of course, in this cold open. And it wasn't dragged out long enough to be suspenseful or menacing from Jai Courtney, but it also wasn't sudden enough to be shocking and bleak. It was, like, kind of in that middle where I felt like it was awkwardly handled, where it didn't really elicit what I believe would be the intended effect of that scene. for me. So there was like, it was just kind of like the movie was off to a rocky start, is what I'd say when I started. I do agree that I think some of the performances are pretty good. I think the writing overall is pretty solid, especially when it's dealing with some of this like more thematic questions of what's more dangerous, man or a shark, you know, or an apex predator, these sort of ideologies. I thought a lot of that was pretty fun, but I don't know if this like quite nailed it for me overall.
Oh, really? So the funny thing about this is I don't really have a lot of arguments for you because I think as a shark movie, it's a pretty like weak shark movie. But like I did enjoy the kind of the like serial killer. Like I said, like I think a lot of the performances are really like carrying this movie. I'm very curious if, you know, I know Sean Byrne usually writes what he directs.
Yes.
And where this isn't the case, I wonder if that could be some of the issue. Because I really think this is the only thing he's ever done that he hasn't written.
Yeah, for me, it's the sort of thing where I feel like a lot of the dialogue in particular, the monologues, like they actually work quite well. For me, it's more so the more like the story structure or the plot. I'm not sure really works. For example, you really have to buy into kind of this whirlwind romance in the movie that essentially takes place over a one-night stand to kind of, you know, get an emotional heft out of the later half of the movie, where I was just kind of like, well, these people barely know each other. So it wasn't necessarily perfectly handled. Or what else was there? Oh, it was just this aspect of these sorts of movies. Usually when you have someone kind of in captivity, like captured in, you know, they're in basically a scenario where there's no escape. Oftentimes it kind of evolves into like an escape room where they're kind of exploring the room, every nook and cranny. They're discovering little secrets. They're kind of getting closer and closer, inching their way to escape. Where this movie, don't get me wrong, there are sequences where people escape, quote unquote, but it's always resolved very quickly. It's like, oh, someone jumps off the boat and we get them instantly with like, you know, a lifesaver. Or it's like, oh, someone swims away a little bit, but we scoop them up in a net. Or it kind of repeats this scenario of people just escaping by like happenstance. A lot of the time just like it was just they happened to slip away rather than this elaborate plan. There are a couple of moments where it deviates from that, and that's kind of near the beginning of the movie, which I thought was a little bit smarter in some of those aspects. But as it goes on, it just kind of wore a little bit thin for me, I think, specifically when we get to the section that they describe in the movie as the matinee. I just started to really feel the length from then on out, because it is very much like people escaping, you know, swimming away for 3 minutes, getting captured again by one way or another, you know, reeled back in, to say. And it's just, it was just a little bit long for me. And this movie is, what? It's only 98 minutes?
Yeah.
And once again, it's a shark movie. So, and I mean, it's a shark movie, but it's also a serial killer movie. And we'll get into the conceit of the serial killer stuff in the spoiler section. But a lot of that did work for me, to be clear. Like, for example, the first quote unquote serial killer kill, I thought was pretty harrowing. I thought it was like a good, horrifying sequence. It involved sharks in such a way that I don't think I've seen that specific thing executed on screen before. So I thought that was pretty effective. And I think kind of some of the aspects around the serial killer stuff are done even more better than the shark stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that's the case. I think maybe I'm a little more let's fucking go on it, just because I'm always apprehensive. Like, obviously, this was distributed in the theaters here by Shudder, and we know as much as we love Shudder is a very like hit or miss. They're either like pretty great or they're like kind of bad, and so I think my expectations going into this, even though I was super excited with the trailer and who it is by, I'm always apprehensive, because then I'm like, oh, well, you know, is Sean Byrne, like, is this just like, it's like, oh, this is going on Shudder, whatever. Like,
yeah, is this just a paycheck? It's been 10 years, and it's a fair question, or, you know, this kind of have in the back of your mind as you're seeing this movie, just because obviously in 2009, he was probably hungry to break in. Devil's Candy came out in 2015, and as we all know, indie filmmaking, it takes, you know, a village to get it made. It takes a couple of years to even mount up to kind of get the funds in order to make something like that. So I assume that he probably had a couple of years off, maybe in between those projects. But, you know, 10 years to get to this point, it is the sort of thing, like that question of like, well, does he still have it? Whatever I liked back in 2016, 2017, when I watched those other two movies, is that going to be on screen in this one? And I do think it is more capable in some aspects than another Shudder movie or another like indie movie. Like we watch a fair few low budget kind of what you just say is like not great horror movies on this show, or at least movies that don't feel like they're in capable hands. This one for me, I think largely felt like it needed another draft of the script and it needed a little bit more budget. And at the end of the day, that doesn't really come down on the director, Sean Burns, so much, just because it is the sort of thing where it's like you only have the amount of money you have to make a movie, and this movie's ambitious for probably what it's doing at its budget level, and the script, he didn't write this one. So it's I'm a little bit more sympathetic.
Are you supporting the fact that maybe he should have more money so that he could actually commit real shark murders on video? And
Absolutely. That's what we need. We need him to be filming actual murder, and then when we're watching this movie, it winds up being a legitimate snuff film, and we're just all absolutely horrified. But no, there's parts of the movie that you can see like they digitally put someone's face on something and it looks very bad. Or once again, just the lighting of the sharks underneath in that cold open, which is probably the only part of the movie where there's like, let's say, a dozen sharks kind of swarming. It just doesn't look great. And it's a shame that it's the cold open, because that's most people's, it's going to be your first experience with the movie, and there's probably going to be a lot of people that are like, oh my God, what are we watching? Is this like an asylum production here? It's not quite that bad, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's kind of, people are going to judge the rest of the movie through that lens of what did I just first see. And yeah, and like I said, a lot of the other stuff you said, I kind of agree with, like, obviously, you brought up, like, there's this Zephyr and Moses kind of relationship going on, and I think that it was bare bones there for, I guess, like what they needed to progress whatever story they're telling, but like there's no real character development. I thought even with Zephyr, like, they try to explain, like her background and why she's the way she is, but like they don't really, and then it's just like, I don't really care.
No, it winds up being the sort of like villain explanation where it's like, oh, you and I aren't so different, is kind of more so how they hand wave a lot of that, where, Jai Courtney's character of Tucker sees himself as an apex predator, sees himself as a shark, and essentially the fight in this main character, Zephyr, he kind of identifies as like, oh, there's a bit of shark in you as well, essentially, a bit of fight in you. And it's the sort of thing where, yeah, sure. you need a protagonist that is, fighting back in this sort of movie. I mean, most people would be dead within the first 15 minutes of this movie, and you don't have much of a movie if that's the case.
Exactly. And now I won't get into it. I'll wait for the spoiler section to really, really get into it. But I kind of, once we had the conceit of what, like, Tucker does, I kind of got excited for you. I don't think it ended up, they didn't use it very well, but I was like, oh, are they mixing also found footage into this shark serial killer movie that you've already sold me and Colton on?
Oh, I was excited as well. Yeah. And I do think when it's used, because it is used quite sparingly, probably only on like 2 or 3 occasions, I do think it's pretty effective and it's pretty well done. I definitely enjoyed those sequences without specifically saying all the details of it, but once again, it's another thing that I feel like it's developed probably about 70% of the way there, and I needed just a little bit more to push it over the top. And that's kind of like a lot of this movie, where it's like, oh, we're almost there in so many aspects. Outside of Jai Courtney obviously having the time of his life, given a very committed performance, he understands the assignment. And then I feel like the other two kind of main characters of Zephyr and Moses, like, they're fine. They're not bad in the movie or anything, but it's more so just like their characters aren't developed enough for me to fully care about them too much, or to really like buy into the conceit of their relationship and that sort of thing that we'll get into in more detail in the spoiler section for sure.
Yeah, I thought Hassie Harrison I thought she was good. Like, I didn't think she was terrible or anything. And I mean, This is one of the things where like you said, I mean, I feel like the role's kind of just underwritten in general. So with the material that she's given, I thought she gave a pretty good kind of final girl performance that you need for this. I'm not like, I was looking at her filmography, and I guess I would have seen her in Southbound, which I'm a big fan of. But Yeah, no, I thought she was all right. It's really hard when Courtney is just like so good in this, and it's just, I almost wish Hassie was like maybe like 20, 15, 17% better just to like match him. Cause he's just like we said, he's just like on a million and just like ramped up. And I just felt like no one else could really like get on that level to make it like truly epic.
But yeah, would you recommend people check this one out in theaters? I mean, we're a bit late. I don't even know if it's still playing in most people's theaters, but
it'll be coming on Shudder, I'm sure, in a couple months. So, but I mean, if you could, I would suggest it. I had a good time. Talk
about your theater experience now.
We
there
have
you go. Yeah.
Put in our theater experience.
Here, now you can insert it here.
Yeah. So when I went, as I always say, I went like a Thursday night, so before opening of it. Always in the back theater at the back of the building, same room. So I get in there, and then only me, and then 3 women come in that are like 50, over the age of 50. And like they're on a girls' night, they're laughing, they're enjoying themselves, and they sit directly behind me. And this is the one time I wasn't like, I was like, this could be fun.
Yeah, you were one of the girls that
evening. And at first, I was kind of worried. I did the double check on my ticket. I'm like, am I in the right place? Like, are these guys here to see the serial killer shark movie? They look like they just came out of like a high-rise office building, like receptionists or something at a corporate building. And no, they were there. And I've never seen people, and they enjoyed themselves more than I did. They were screaming and laughing. And at one point, one of the women just yelled out, "I'd let him kidnap me." And like,
wow.
One of them thought they saw a bulge at some point, and they were very fascinated at the size of that bulge and what was going on there. Lots of comments on how he was jacked, like his arms were just massive, and they just had a really good time with this, and maybe that enhanced my time with it just because they were hilarious. And then, like I said, on top of that, like, it's always fun to see a horror movie when people are just like yelling because they're scared and stuff. And even when I'm just kind of just sitting there plain faced, it makes it more enjoyable for me because I'm like, oh yeah, they're having a great time. But what about you, Colton? Do you recommend it? Did you have any iconic theater experience with this?
Nothing really to report from the theater for me this time. I saw this too late. I only saw this like the week that 28 years later came out. So it was the sort of thing that there was, I think, 2 other people in theaters with me. I was at the weirdo screening where it's just 3 lonely men watching this shark movie. So it was the opposite of like your elderly ladies' night out. None
of them yelled, "I'd let him kidnap me."
No, nobody yelled that, sadly. But yeah, I think I'd recommend this one as well to see it. It's the sort of thing that I'm more so recommending it just because I want you to support a small movie by a director I like. Is this something you have to see on the big screen? No, probably not. But it was competent enough that I've probably recommended you see worse movies in theaters over the course of this show. And I want Sean Byrne to get back on the horse and make another movie within the next 3 to 4 years. So go see Dangerous Animals if you can, still in theaters. I have my doubts, but check your local listings. So we're both recommending you check this one out in theaters. And with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Dangerous Animals. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Dangerous Animals, so if you've not seen Dangerous Animals, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, we were kind of dancing around what Tucker, the serial killer, does. You mentioned some found footage aspect of this movie. Let's get into it. He's kind of a snuff film serial killer, or not shark killer, but feeding people to sharks. This was an interesting wrinkle that I didn't see coming when I walked into this movie at all.
Yeah, no, I had no idea, and I thought it was pretty cool. Like you said, like an idea that definitely was only like 70% developed. They didn't go all the way with it, but I thought some of the shots where we're kind of getting into like this, he's using like this like 80s, early 90s camera that obviously they try to like, lazily hint at. He has like some sort of nostalgia for this, camera and that kind of thing. But I thought, like, I was really pumped, like, when we got the view of the camera, and I'm like, this is actually, like, kind of cool. Like, not only am I seeing a shark movie, not only am I seeing a serial killer movie, but then I'm looking at these murders through the lens of this, like, found footage of this serial killer's, like, video collection. And like you said, I mean, unfortunately, I think what we see is not fantastic, so it kind of ruins the experience. Like, you know, we get to see, like, these victims just kind of, like, move around on like this lift system as the sharks are biting, but you don't, like, really see any, like, viscera or, like, gore. And, like, to me, this is where they could have really leaned in and, like, gave us some gore, give us some of that shark brutality.
Yeah, any of the gore is always in the aftermath, and it's not seen through the actual the camcorder recording. It's always, an underwater shot. You see half a torso floating, or I guess near the end of the movie we get a absolutely terrible one of Jai Courtney himself dying in, like, the big shark, where it kind of comes up and grabs him and you see him flying through the air and his face is, like, terribly digitally put on there and it's really bad looking. So I guess you see that one as well. But yeah, it's the sort of thing that I think is such a cool idea that I wanted to see it explored a little bit more. I even wanted maybe even a hint at why there's this VHS fascination with him, which I don't believe I got, but I was thinking about how he was this young boy who survived a brutal shark attack in his childhood. That it was the sort of thing where it would have been nice to see maybe news footage that he had on, like, let's say the old VHSs, where it kind of detailed some of his wounds, and you'd kind of get that merging of the violent nature of the wounds merging with the VHS. Or even if there was somebody there, like, let's say, filming their family vacation from the shore, and in the background you see, like, a kid surfing kind of get hit by a shark or something, right? There was an aspect that I just think there was, like, it was missing there. I don't need everything to be overly explained, but even just seeing him kind of flip through that quickly, it would have just been a little bit interesting. Or a montage of him rewinding some VHSs and putting them back in, and you kind of get, like, snippets of the horror. There was an aspect of the found footage VHS kind of snuff film thing that I wanted just to be explored once again, like 10-20% more. Because I thought it was a kernel of a very cool idea.
Yeah, that was exactly my thought. I had thought, oh, it'd be cool if they, it was maybe like, this is the video camera his parents had, and they, were like you said, videotaping him when he was swimming in the shark attack, and then it's like they caught it, and then it's like, okay, that makes sense. Like, this is the exact camera, because we see the scene where he's, like, freaking out looking for this same camera when his camera is damaged.
Yeah, there's a sentimentality to the camera, and, like, a nervousness and anxiousness when essentially our main character of Zephyr is, like, threatening to throw it in the water and stuff, that you think there's more to it other than just the footage itself, right? There's a connection to the camera and that model that, once again, it's hinted at but never really.
And this is where they really ask you for you to let go of any reality and really want you to disbelieve something. Because as someone that still owns VHSs and does at times need a VCR to play these VHSs, I've never gone anywhere and been like, oh, there's the exact same VCR that I currently have just in this, like, pawn shop. And I feel like these cameras, I'm like, what are the chances that the same camera is just hanging around everywhere?
Yeah, I wonder if this movie just could have been a little bit more. And once again, we're writing a different movie, but it's the sort of thing where I think this movie is stronger if Moses somehow winds up abducted much earlier in the movie and he's with Zephyr for a lot of it, because then it's this awkward one night stand, 11-hour relationship kind of develops over kind of a codependency nature to it because of purely based on their survival. And you can kind of buy into them that maybe developing something as they're trapped in the bottom of this boat for days. And then you could have Jai Courtney being the one going back to shore to get supplies or get a camera, or it's established that he is a weird guy with shark tours, but he also has this tech aspect of it, where he goes to the old video store and they know him there as coming in and getting, gear and whatnot, right? So it's not out of the realm of, it doesn't seem as ridiculous, right? But whenever we go back to the shore, it's always with Moses doing like the little amount of detective work that it winds up being just like any detective would know to check the cameras in the area that the person was abducted. Like, this is ridiculous shit. Yeah. And I understand it's filtered through an app, but still, this is like a surf town. For them to install this camera for an app to have access to, there would have been permits and discussions with the town. It would have been part of the town council meetings, all this shit, right? Like, everyone would know a camera exists there. But for the cops to not even look at it during the time when when Zephyr was abducted, it's just, there was aspects of that where I was just like, it's a little ridiculous that we're even dealing into this. I would rather the movie be this escape room movie where they're both in the belly of this boat with one other girl from the cold open, that sort of movie. But, yeah.
She probably could have also escaped the room a lot easier if she had better strength, because I feel like eating all those dinner rolls, you're just not getting the kind of nutrients you need to escape a serial killer's boat room.
You're not getting the gains.
Yeah, like, and just, I will say, a lot of disgusting moments for me where these dinner rolls are just like laying places that I'm like, I'd throw in the garbage because it's like on the floor or on something, like it's sitting on a bed that there's probably jizz all over, and
well, based on the scenes beforehand, absolutely.
Yeah. And then they're just munching in these dinner rolls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's she's a free spirit, Rowan. She's not she's not a germaphobe, She lives in that van. But other than this, it's like, I don't have a whole lot to say about this movie. I think the ooby-dooby motherfucker didn't really work for me too much, because once again, you got to buy into this ooby-dooby romance that you feel it implicitly, even though it's silly, and you just love each other. So that was kind of whatever. The whole aspect of like the death itself with like the harpoon gun and all that, it was like there was aspects of it I liked, but once again, the movie at this point, I just was feeling like it was too long. Yeah. There was too many parts where it was getting too ridiculous with like the helicopters overhead or the party boat that was always nearby, or that he was going to be murdering these people in broad daylight in like an area that there seemed to be other people nearby. That it was just, it was like straining the credibility of the movie to me to such an extent that I was kind of just out of it like the longer we kind of went on. And that all kind of culminates in how this character in the beginning of the movie, she was smart enough to kind of use the underwire of a bikini or a bra as a lockpick, but it took her 3 days before she even contemplated breaking her thumb, which anybody who's ever seen a piece of media with somebody in a handcuff, I mean, if they're truly trapped, breaking your thumb is like the first thing they do, right? And I don't know why it didn't specifically work in this movie. Did she break it in properly, or like obviously
I don't know what was going on? Yeah,
I understand that she has to nod off because they need the direct, cinematic correlation to like, oh, she's a shark, literally, she's gnawing off her own thumb. But I just didn't understand why the thumb break didn't help her. Like get her hand out of the handcuff. In retrospect, the breaking of the thumb is completely pointless because she never managed to get out of the cuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like you. Like, I don't have a lot of notes on it. I mean, obviously, I think the peak of what this movie can do is not just like, these glimmers of hope with the found footage, but like the Jaw Courtney kind of, what I think is like kind of the scene that's going to be remembered in this is like him drunk on the boat, the girls down in the room, and he's just rocking out, eating like fish, which I'm very curious. Like, I'm like, you kind of feel like maybe fishermen would want to eat like something else other than fish if you're just on a boat all the time. Yeah, get some, especially he's got some gains going on. Like, he's got to be eating other stuff. But like, yeah, just him drunk, singing, just like women screaming in videos that he's watching, like that was the stuff where I'm like, man, that like Sean Byrne's having like so much fun here. Like everyone is just like, I'm like, this is it. This is what I want. And unfortunately, I just feel like there wasn't enough of that with the Tucker character. He's silly in it, but I wanted to see him like at that extreme, like a couple of times where I almost felt like Zephyr was almost like too powerful in there. Like she just outwitted him like too much, where I was just kind of like, well, like we see all the tapes. He's been doing this like for a bit. So you would think that other people have tried a lot of this stuff and he's kind of like, you know, got it under wraps.
That's where the movie, I think, would be better from another pass for plotting and whatnot, because he is someone who you can understand that he likes the thrill of the chase, right?
Yeah.
Like there is the whole story about the Marlin in the movie, right? And he starts calling her the Marlin. So I think this movie is just a little bit better if the boat is more so out to sea a little bit more. There's truly no chance of escape. That idea of mania is going through all the characters. Maybe there's something wrong with the engine, so he's trapped out there as well. You know, this sort of idea, we're stuck, and then they're making the most out of this escape room scenario where he set things up, or he placed things in different places. Like he knows what people are going to try, and he's waiting for her to kind of reach his expectations of her to, you know, to kind of lean into this game of like cat and mouse, because there is almost like she escapes like 3 or 4 times. It's not once in the movie. And that's where the movie starts to like strain this credulity. Like it just makes no sense to me at that point in the movie. So it's the sort of thing where I almost wish there was an explanation of like, oh, he's doing this intentionally to make it more fun for him, and then also culminate in this, you know, this sacrifice to the sharks on his snuff films to make it that much more enjoyable for him. But as it is right now in the movie we're watching, it's more so just like a set of coincidences more than anything that it happens. It's not really a master plan on either of theirs part. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah,
this
no,
one.
I'm good to go into rating it.
So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Dangerous Animals?
So it has a lot of flaws. I still think I'm going to come in with a yay, like a soft yay, because I enjoyed it. And like, this is one, like, I could see me watching this again and enjoying myself watching it, showing it to people, because I do think there's a lot of fun in this. Like we said, there's a lot of stuff that looks really bad and stuff I wish was developed. But, you know, I think if anything, you're coming for that Tucker performance. And I think to me, this like delivers. This almost delivers to me, you know, I think I said in the spoiler-free section that I kind of likened it to, like, Cage, and I was obviously thinking about, like, Long Legs, and everyone talking about Cage's performance in Long Legs, and how, like, wild and eccentric it is. I'm like, I think I like this performance way better. Like, this one, he's just living in it, and for an actor that, like, I only know from Suicide Squad is Captain Boomerang. I just wasn't really expecting this from this guy, and now I'm kind of on the Jaw Courtney train. I'm like, all right, like let's go. Like I want him to get in his Russell Crowe era. I'm like, let's just get in on these horror movies. Now he's got to do like an exorcism movie where he brings the same cocaine energy to it, and you know what? The Pope's Exorcist, too. Let's do it. They need a third. They already got the duo. Bring them in. Russell Crowe has a drinking problem. He's got like a cocaine problem. And then they got the straight-laced buddy, and they're just fighting demons.
Wow, what a pitch.
Let's get it. Let's get it.
Studios, listen up.
What about you, Colton?
Yeah, this one's going to be an okay for me. I don't hate it, but I think it's just where I'm more of a fan of Sean Byrne. I had higher expectations after basically a decade of him not putting anything out. It was a sort of movie where, as I was watching it, I felt like I was rewriting it in my head, which isn't what you're supposed to do when you're watching movies, but it was also like the movie was losing me enough that I was thinking like, oh, why isn't this working for me as I'm watching the movie? So, you know, I wasn't completely engrossed by what I was seeing on screen. I do think there's some fun things, as we've mentioned, with the snuff film serial killer aspect, especially with the shark ceremonies, or, you know, some of the acting is good for what it is, even if it's a bit underdeveloped. But it didn't nail it for me. It's probably not something I would watch again. I would definitely return to those other Sean Byrne movies first, just to see if they still kind of live up to the hype or live up.
I kind of need to do that soon.
Yeah, so this one's going to be an okay from me. And now that you know where we both stand on Dangerous Animals, I think zombie fans have been waiting long enough. It's time to discuss 28 Years Later, which was released June 20th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Rowan, we both covered 28 Days Later earlier this year on the pod, but in case folks missed that episode, remind us, are you a fan of this franchise, and by extension, were you looking forward to 28 Years Later?
Yeah, I'd say I was like, I don't want to say I'm like astonished. I don't think any of us were really like, 5-star masterpiece here. I respect it for what it was when it came out. And, it really was groundbreaking at the time. Obviously, the way it was shot and Cillian Murphy, obviously, kind of like our introduction to him. And I remember watching it and really loving it. And I'm one of the few. So I actually, before I went to see this, I decided I needed to rewatch 28 Weeks Later, because I remember owning 28 Weeks Later, and I couldn't really remember anything from it. I just remember when it first came out, I'm like, oh, hey, it's the guy from Romeo and Juliet. He's in it. So I was like, I'm really pumped about that. And I will say, Letterboxd, not a fan. 28 Weeks Later, I didn't think it was like as bad as everyone thought it was.
Okay,
It's still not like
right.
great. I thought it had like a real Resident Evil energy. And
Oh, wow.
and, I think the original Resident Evil also kind of gets a bad rap. So, I was fully prepared coming into this. And, I was just I'm excited. I really like Danny Boyle, and obviously you and me are Alex Garland bros. And, how could you not be excited for Danny Boyle returning to this? Like, were you pumped? Do you also agree 28 Weeks Later, like a modern masterpiece, or?
I'm not going to go that far because I haven't seen 28 Weeks Later and probably close to the 23 years it's been. But what I'll say is that when I returned to 28 Days Later, I was definitely one of the detractors on the show. I think Mike and I both gave it an okay, and we were a little bit, lukewarm on it.
Yeah.
For me, it was just like the stylistic language that the movie was using. It was just like, I was allergic to it. It kind of had this feeling of almost like the Saw movies, how they're edited, but like for the entire length in very terrible, like consumer grade camcorder quality, that I had a really hard time buying into it, even though I've remembered in my mind loving it. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of Danny Boyle. I love Trainspotting. I liked Slumdog Millionaire when it came out, even though I think most people look at that now as problematic, but he's always been an interesting filmmaker that has a very like audacious style to a lot of the things he does. And this one in particular, I liked this post-apocalyptic feel of it, where it's essentially it's decades after the apocalypse has happened. This is kind of like a stylistic aesthetic that for me is like, I think of The Last of Us, right? With those games taking place like 20 odd years after the apocalypse, essentially. And this one is literally 28 years later after it. So it's kind of like the world is being reclaimed by nature to a certain degree, but there's still a lot of horrors in that nature outside of these, small pockets of civilization. And this one in particular, as we were leading up to it, I thought the trailers were fine. I saw them dozens of times for sure, but it didn't look to me like it was going to be an absolute banger. And then the reviews for it came out, and I was floored. Like, this movie, it had like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for a few days.
Movie of the year. I've heard
everyone
so
was
many
saying,
critics say that.
It was like everyone forgot about Sinners all of a sudden. They were like, oh, no, this is the new hot horror movie. Everyone was freaking out about it. But yeah, essentially there's been this sentiment kind of growing that with this and Sinners, we're in for like another very high quality year of horror. And, basically everyone on my Letterboxd has been giving this thing like 4.5 and 5 stars. So like a lot of people think it's a masterpiece. So when I was going into it, obviously there were some more expectations, higher expectations. And we'll get into it. So were all those years worth the wait? Well, before we get into that, it's time we take a listen to the trailer.
There are many kinds of death, and some are better than others.
Once you walk onto that mainland, there's no rescue.
You're scared.
A little bit.
There's no power in the war.
28 years later, rated R.
28 Years Later was directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, and the story is as follows. 28 years after the outbreak of the Rage virus, a group of survivors live on a small island. When a young boy leaves the island on a mission to the mainland, he discovers secrets, wonders, and horrors that have mutated not only the affected, but other survivors. Now, here on Now Slang, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on 28 Years Later?
I don't think I've ever been so excited to also hear your opinions because I'm feeling, we'll see, I'm feeling like we're almost aligned, but
Okay.
for me, I say when all these critics zig, we zag. Yeah, not movie of the year for me.
Wow.
Especially, and this is going to be wild. I can't, because like I said, I get people's complaints. But when I looked at 28 Days Later, which, like you said, we did our anniversary episode on, was it not? I believe was 28 Days Later.
Oh, was it that? Yeah. I think it was in February. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
It was our anniversary episode. And then having watched 28 Weeks Later, and then this, for the hype this came in, I shouldn't think 28 Weeks Later had the strongest opening to all three of these movies. I'm just saying 28 Weeks Later, banger, opener, like perfect opening to a zombie movie. This one, I was like, eh.
Are you just not a fan of the Teletubbies, or what's the issue?
So I like the Teletubbies. And
Okay.
listen, I get it. And, you know, I've heard people already, you know, like talking about, oh, you know, the children being murdered. Like, oh, we get a whole bunch of children murdered in the beginning of this film. But, like, I'm like, yeah, but, like, the opener's, like, really, like, 30 seconds long. And, like, what I thought the other entries did was, like, especially that second opener for the second one, like, it was just, like, horror for 10 minutes of just, like, pure chaos, zombies, people being shitty, people being murdered, like, all these type of things. Where this, I was like, oh yeah, like I guess, but like we didn't really get a lot of, you know, we get to see the zombies crash through the door and then, you know, the blood splatter on the TV, and I'm like, okay, all right, like I guess that's, and then it immediately goes from that to like, now let's just get into like this long adventure story, essentially, this coming of age adventure post-apocalyptic story that makes it seem like this was written by a YA teen.
YA teen?
YA teen. So, I mean, yeah, I was so like, I feel bad because, like I said, I like Danny Boyle. I will say, I thought that this looked really good. And obviously, the whole hype about this was he shot this on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. This is like all entirely done. Apparently, like all the wide angle shots. I was listening, I can't remember who I was listening to, but they were talking about like he rigged just multiple iPhone 15s up. So they would like, and you know what? Like, give it to Danny Boyle, like wanting to play with technology and, you know, do things his way. Like, to make a movie look this good on your iPhone is pretty impressive. Like, I can't do that.
But yeah, essentially they've rigged 20 iPhones in like a Halo configuration around.
I just kind of thought, like, you know, yeah, the ideas that are explored in this are good, but the praise this is getting, like, it's acting like none of these ideas have ever been done in a zombie movie, ever. And I, like, the amount of times I eye rolled that I was like, this happened in this zombie movie from, like, the 80s. And, like, I was like, this is The Walking Dead. Like, I was just like, to me, this felt so influenced by all this other zombie media, where to me, like, the real gem of 28 Days Later is it, like, really carved its own path of, like, what a zombie movie is, and, like, doing things that no one else were doing with zombie movies, where this, I was just like, and then just the cardinal sin to me is I'm like, I know this movie's only an hour and 44 minutes. Like, what's going on here? Rowan, the dullard Rowan is not looking at Letterboxd, not realizing that this has been optioned for 3 movies.
Oh yeah, it's the beginning of a trilogy.
And I'm just like, fucking Jesus Christ. Like, of course. And then I feel bad because I'm like, I'm talking shit, and maybe this is gonna wrap around. The 3 are gonna come out, and I'm gonna be like, as a trilogy, you know, move over Star Wars, like, here is 28 years later. But then I'm like, oh, and Danny Boyle isn't coming back to do the other 2?
Well, he's coming back for the 3rd one, but the 3rd one hasn't been greenlit yet. The second one is being directed by Nia DaCosta.
Which I think will be interesting for you and me, just because
Absolutely.
you a fan of Candyman.
I am.
Me
the
not
Candyman
a fan
remake.
of Candyman.
Yeah.
And me a fan of the Marvels. And
Oh my
you
God.
not a fan of the Marvels.
Well, I haven't seen that yet, to be fair. I still have avoided it.
I enjoyed the Marvels, and I thought she did a great
Okay.
job with it. Most people didn't think that. I am in the minority of that.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I mean, I thought the performances in this were okay. Alfie Williams is fine. He's good. I don't know if maybe he just annoys me. It seems everybody else really likes him. He has a lot of different, like, emotional range he's got to do in this, and I think he does a pretty good job. Aaron Taylor Johnson, just a boss. I'm always pumped when he comes in. I'm like, that's my guy. That's Kraven the Hunter right there.
He's given the dad performance that most dads in the theater. He's in the movie, because this movie is kind of broken up into almost like 2.5, 3 different movies. He's giving kind of the more traditional dad movie experience where they're going to be watching Aaron Taylor Johnson. They're going to be like, hell yeah, the entire time. Just so excited by him.
Also, and I know, like, Aaron Taylor Johnson, like, old enough to have a kid that age, but I just feel like he presents younger. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm really, like, buying this, that you got this, like, 12-year-old kid.
Well, it's in the apocalypse as well, right?
Well,
like,
yeah,
life is more challenging. It's,
I mean,
more bleak.
What do they have to do? They're just banging, so I guess, like, who knows? Yeah.
Exactly.
And, like, Jodie Comer, I thought she was pretty good. Obviously, I think she has, like, the most difficult role in this for what she's asked to do. But, like, the real issue in this film to me is, like, this is going along. I'm a little annoyed. Because I think, if you're going in for a zombie movie, you're probably not going to be satisfied. There's some cool gore in this, but I'll give you a little spoiler, little tidbit, is that gore just going to be repeated over and over again. Like, it's the same thing over, nothing new happens. And like we said, it's the first part of a 3-part movie. So it's like, really, we're just getting a tease of the zombies. And I thought, like, I thought the way, so there's some scenes they shoot zombies that I'm sure they thought was different and cool. I thought it looked terrible. I was like,
yeah, you're talking about the camera rig that they used, I would assume, where they strap 20 cameras, iPhones, to basically like a semicircle rig, and essentially you'll get an arrow go through a zombie's head, and then you'll get 15 frames as it basically goes around the whole zombie's head. So you get like almost like a 180 degree view of the arrow going in the head. I didn't really like that either, to tell you the truth.
Well,
it's a very
in the
audacious
infrared stuff, I didn't really.
Oh yeah, okay. That was a little bit more sparing, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, and the other issue is once we get to the Ralph Fiennes stuff, I'm like, Ralph Fiennes basically is like, everybody jump on my back. Just jump on my back. And he outacts every single person in this movie.
Yeah, but Ralph Fiennes, he's amazing. He's been on like a run now for probably 10 years.
I know.
Every single time he's in a movie, he's the best performance in the movie.
I just feel bad.
And yes,
for
of course, that's the case here as well. Even though he is playing a loony, bizarre sort of character, despite what he's saying is very poignant. But I agree that obviously Ralph Fiennes is amazing.
And then obviously we'll save it for the spoiler section. But
the
like
other character, yeah,
the other character. It's Slay's alumni. I'm not sure that hit, like, some of the critics seem to think it really hit. I was just like, ugh. Like, to me, when you end a movie off, and I'm just like, what? Like, what is going on here?
Oh, I hated it as well. I hated the ending. I can't, tiptoe around that. But, Rowan, you've been rambling. Yeah. I gotta say something. I think I like this a little bit better than you.
Yeah.
But this was still a much weirder movie than I expected. It is experimental in some ways. It's surreal and abstract in other ways. And then sometimes it's just a straightforward, run-of-the-mill action horror zombie thing that we've seen half a dozen times, especially if you play video games. And it does come together into like a singular, strange vision. But it's a vision that I definitely enjoyed at different points in the movie. A little bit more than others. There's just some stylistic stuff I really don't like to it. I like, you kind of said that it looked really good for you. I thought a lot of the color grading was off. There's a lot of inconsistencies. The movie's dark at some points and it's light. There's lots of VFX that look really bad, doing like sky replacement stuff. It feels like a surreal fantasy adventure movie more than a zombie horror movie at times. And I do think that's
way at night looked terrible.
So I loved that sequence. I loved it. I think it's excellent, but I agree that when you pulled out to the wides, it looks absolutely terrible. But this movie to me is just like, it's over edited all to hell. We're mixing kind of archival footage. We're mixing surreal footage, faux historical footage. We're intercutting between, you'll have like you'll have a frame of just like another archer firing an arrow. Then we see our character appear on top of them to fire the arrow. And like some of this stuff is interesting, or some of this stuff is obviously we haven't seen in a lot of other movies. It's kind of like Danny Boyle's kind of in your face filmmaking that, if you've seen Train Spotting, you've seen some of these things used, but it's weird to see like Train Spotting sensibilities in your 28 years later movie. It was kind of like bumping against like how I like movies to be, similar to how when I was watching 28 Days Later earlier this year, I just couldn't get over how terrible the quality was and how like the editing was like a music video from the early 2000s. This one, the editing was like a Taken movie a lot of the time. And a lot of the camera work and what it was doing, sure, it's interesting, or sure, it might be novel that I haven't seen some of these methods used before. But I don't know if cutting between 20 cameras within a second has the impact of just like, if you swung the camera around, or you kind of question, why do you even need that sort of camera work in your 28 years later movie? For me, that it kind of left me feeling a little bit cold. Also, I'd say for, I don't know, probably about 20% of the movie, I thought the audio mix was really bad. I couldn't really make out what people were saying.
Okay, so it wasn't just me.
The cold open was impossible to make out, in my opinion. I had no idea what anybody was saying.
When it started, I thought I was like, do I have to go like ask them, tell them their speakers are broken or something? Yeah,
but also just a lot of the dialogue, it just wasn't consistent, like what the audio mix was. There was parts of the movie that the camera's focused on one character. You should be able to hear what they're saying perfectly, but for some reason I can't hear them. There were other moments where, clearly it was like 80 yards, they're further away and I hear them perfectly. It's just, it wasn't the accent work. It was just purely, I think, like a technical thing as I was listening to it, that I was straining to hear what they were saying at times. For me, I just think that first section, basically this is a movie of 3 parts. It's basically like a father's movie, a mother's movie, and then it's like almost like a whole holy religious sort of ethereal movie. And like some people are kind of laying how this movie is structured on like aspects of like religion and Christianity, having like the father figure, the mother figure, and then kind of like a Holy Spirit. And I understand what they're saying with that, but for me, they start off with what I thought was the best portion, largely, and I understand it's something we've seen before. I'm a huge fan of The Last of Us. The first part of this movie is a young boy and his father going off into the world, fighting zombies, foraging for survival, and fighting with bows and arrows and stuff. And it's something I've definitely seen before, kind of this idea of like what makes a man, what is masculinity, what is survival, all these aspects. But honestly, when it shifted away from that into the next portion of the movie, that is kind of a little bit, it slows down a little bit and it's more about life, but it's also gets sillier. It's weird. It's like the movie is afraid to slow down, so they have to throw in a comedic relief character for 15 minutes before we get to Ralph Fiennes. And there was just aspects there that I was confused. The causeway scene that you mentioned, where kind of they're doing this crazy, I don't know, space sky replacement where it almost looks like you're in outer space. I didn't like how surreal and weird that was, but I do think that it was built up in such a way of essentially this alpha, this different flavor of zombie chasing after both of them as they're kind of coming back to their home. I thought it was effective. It had me on the edge of my seat. I won't reveal how it goes one way or the other, but when I was watching it, I was definitely fully engrossed in that moment for sure. And I don't think for the rest of the movie there was another moment that I ever felt that way, which was within the first probably 45 minutes. So yeah, it's a weird movie. It feels like it rushes and drags to its ending. Where it chooses to end the movie is completely baffling. I understand what it's paying homage to a certain degree, or like how it's referencing certain taboo figures and whatnot. It was just like, I thought it was a very strange place to end this movie, especially with how kind of emotional or tender or whatnot they're trying to make this movie by the end. Like you said earlier, this isn't really a movie that I would expect many zombie fans to just adore. This is the sort of movie that my stepfather, Carvey, who loves gore, loves violence, zombie, just basically what I'd call almost like these hollow action movies, loves that sort of shit, loves the other 28 Days and Weeks Later's movie. I think he's going to hate this. I think he's going to be bored silly after the first 45 minutes because it's kind of like it is a zombie movie in terms of like that is what they fight with every now and then. But after the first chunk of the movie, it's used so sparingly. And what you see is, as you said, similar zombies or similar kind of scenarios for the characters that it doesn't kind of reinvent anything or kind of keep your attention in that capacity. As a zombie fan, you got to buy into the emotional story or you're not going to care at all after the first hour, I don't think.
100%. And it's funny because you were saying that you felt like Carvey would be bored of this. To me, I felt this entire time, I think Danny Boyle was bored with this. Like, the entire time I was watching it, I was like, he has no interest in coming back to this material. I think he did it because the fans wanted it. Garland obviously had something he felt he had to say. Like, he's writing all three of these, or has written all three of these. But, like, to me, I was like, yeah, 28 Days Later, I'm like, that's someone that's like, I'm making a zombie movie. I'm making, this, like, badass zombie movie that's gonna change the way people think about zombie movies, but there's the carnage, there's all this. And to me, this is like, oh, you want me to come back to this property? I've kind of moved on. So, like, let me fit, these, like, fantasy aspects and these post-apocalyptic aspects and this adventurer's hero story aspect, like, into it that I'd rather tell than doing, like, a zombie movie. And that's just, that's how I kind of felt throughout it all. And like you said, yeah, like, there's great scenes with that could be great scenes with these different kind of zombies and stuff, but even the different zombies we're given, they just beat you over the head with it the entire movie. It's way overused. And then there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense. I was like, I don't really understand in the world you've created, like, how this happens, what's going on. The information you've presented me, this doesn't make sense in the movie, other than you're obviously, like, trying to make these, like, bigger plot, bigger themes going on.
Yeah, exactly. It's flirting with stuff that obviously this movie comes out in the shadow of The Walking Dead now, right?
Yeah.
Where 28 Days Later probably inspired a lot of The Walking Dead. When I'm watching this, I'm not a Walking Dead fan. I dipped out of it in the 5th season. I read probably the first 4 or 5 volumes of the comic. But even in just that kind of embryonic state of me only seeing probably the first half, maybe even less than that, of The Walking Dead, I've seen all of these themes, all of these questions explored. Now, will I say that The Walking Dead always explores them more successfully, or was The Walking Dead as great as, or good in some aspects as this movie? No, but, like, that's the thing. It's just neither one of them are, like, amazing pieces of art to me. There's aspects to both of them that I like. And it was the sort of thing, as I was watching this, I have seen other pieces of media handle this, lone wolf and cub story, essentially, in this sort of world way better. The Last of Us video game destroys this. There's like it's nowhere near, in my opinion, what this movie accomplishes in this, like, post-apocalyptic world. So it's the sort of thing, as I was watching it, I liked a lot of it, but it didn't feel novel to me, really. And also, even it's, like, weird to kind of point out an issue because in terms of the style, because I hated it. I hated how over edited and frenetic and all this historical footage and all this shit was, like, jammed into it. But if you're going to do that, at least make it consistent. It's only really present within the first hour of the movie, and then they change what sort of movie it is, and then it kind of gets in your face and punk rock and over the top again within the last probably 3 minutes. That is just kind of, when you were saying maybe he's bored with this, it almost it feels like he was excited with it. In the editing process, they were finding all these cool, like, parallels throughout archival footage and throughout, history and whatnot, and merging them all together. And then essentially it was like, okay, well, now we're changing the type of movie this is, and it feels inappropriate to inject these sorts of things into this more dour, tender, section of the movie. But once again, it makes it feel like a completely different movie at times. One thing I'll also say, this might be TMI for our audience, but I missed the emotional climax of the movie. And when you get there, you'll know what it is. And this is truly tragic. I ate KFC before I went in the theater. It was a long day of work. I had like 15 minutes before I could make it to this movie, and I just scarfed it down in the parking lot. And during the emotional climax of this movie, I'll get into it in the spoiler section, my stomach was grumbling, and I truly felt like I was going to shit myself, and it was the first time out of the hundreds of movies I've seen in theaters, I had to rush off to the bathroom. And I was gone, 4 or 5 minutes. I rushed it. I was just trying to, get back to the theater. And I came back, and what I will say is the movie was fundamentally changed when I came back, and I missed a very important scene. So if that discounts my opinion of the movie, that's fine. But I just felt like I had to be honest in my critique that I did miss what most people say is the most beautiful and tear-jerking scene of this movie, because, the KFC was destroying my insides. So I apologize.
You were tear-jerking in the stall, so...
Exactly. But yeah, would you recommend people check this one out in theaters?
So... I talked all...
At least, if you're going to check it out in theaters, don't do it with a full belly of KFC.
Yeah,
I'll say that much.
KFC. I talk all this shit. I would still recommend to see in the theater. I think it's a spectacle. Danny Boyle's getting old, man. So you're not going to get that many more films out of him. And, I agreed with you wholeheartedly. I didn't like the way this looked. I didn't like any of that. But I think it's going to look a hell of a lot better on the big screen than it might necessarily look on your TV. It's definitely made for the big screen. And so I guess go see. Come on, guys. All you guys listen, we're going to go see the other two. It's not like we're banning the 28 Years Later trilogy. But yeah, go see it. Just stay away from the critics. That's what I'll say. Just make your own opinions. Don't ride the wave. What about you? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I would recommend people go see it as well. But what I would say, I would caution you if you're a fan of the franchise, based off of what we've said. I think this might not give you exactly what you expect. In terms of if you are a hardcore zombie, blood and viscera and gore sort of fan, this movie, it has some of that in spades at moments. But largely, this is a more insular, more emotional story. And as Rowan has said, coming of age a couple of times, it is very much a coming of age story throughout a post-apocalyptic world, and kind of, more so dealing with these ideas of death and life and rebirth and, what it means to exist in this sort of world, and a lot less zombie carnage, I would think, than what you might expect. So yeah, we both recommend you check this one out in theaters, and with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for 28 Years Later. We are now in our spoiler discussion for 28 Years Later, so if you've not seen 28 Years Later, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Now, Rowan, I mentioned to the audience right at the end there that I had to rush out of the theater, and I left the theater as Ralph Fiennes was talking to our protagonist of Spike about memento mori, about life and death, and about how they were just about to assess what was wrong with his mother. But I couldn't hold it. I had to go. So I rushed to the washroom, and when I came back, she was doing her final walk in the distance. She was basically walking sadly away and fading away, and it basically cuts to her skull getting prepared. And when I came back into the theater, the vibe was very different. I could tell people were crying. It was somber, and I just felt like I completely missed the emotional core of this movie. I had to read on Wikipedia that she had terminal brain cancer. I had to read that apparently it was done in a very tender, deft way that a lot of people thought was very, very accomplished.
You might have been all right, though, because I feel like after your experience, you were emotional, you felt drained.
I was moved in a different way. Yeah, I was horrified when I rushed back into the theater. But did that moment work for you? Just because, once again, I can't actually accurately assess that moment. I missed it. It was the sort of thing, no joke, I contemplated staying longer at the theater that day to kind of sneak into another screening, right?
Yeah.
That sort of thing, just because I felt like I missed what the movie was building up for the past hour at least. What do you think of that scene or that sequence, or once, like, maybe I don't know how it was even conveyed, like how they even found out like that she had brain cancer or anything, right? So I have no idea.
Yeah, so in the scene, you know, he like that'd be a terrible way to put it. A doctor would lose his license if you put it that way. I was gonna say he feels her up, but like, you know,
God.
he's doing like a test, like, you know, testing her lymph nodes, and you know, he's very like sweet, asking like, can I touch your breasts and like underneath your breasts and all that stuff, and you know, doing his doctor thing, and then basically, yeah, like it just cuts and he's talking about like, this is what's going on, I think, and saying I don't know. And, yeah, I mean, I didn't like, I just said, I didn't think this movie was all that and a bag of potato chips, but I was, you know, a little choked. In that, it's
Okay,
just,
all right.
it's Ray Fiennes. It's Ray Fiennes. The man's a master of his craft. Like, his character is the best character in this entire film. And just the emotional way he delivers lines, and like he's just like so sincere and sweet, and you could like feel, you know, in his kind of, he still played it great because it was this doctor being so sincere, but you can still tell like he's also like kind of, you know, off his rocker a little bit.
Yeah, it's a very strange character, to be clear. He is covered in iodine and he's like this orange. He is hairless, basically, and we see it earlier in the movie that essentially he was almost like what they perceive to be a crazed doctor, you know, arranging corpses in rows and columns, you know, hundreds of corpses, and he was just like this cheery guy still that clearly kind of, they implied that he lost his mind, but clearly after we get to meet him, he has a reason for it, even though I would say he's still a bit crazy, you know?
He's a bit crazy. But yeah, I mean, I thought this worked, and this was where I almost felt like I would have liked it to have a couple more of these moments in the movie, because I think 28 Days Later did this a lot better, where there was a lot of times that for a brief amount of time we'd slow down, and there, you know, like there'd be something moving about, you know, especially the relationship with like when the dad and daughter jump on to the party and like stuff, and just like, you know, like life that is going on that isn't the zombies around you, but other stuff going on, where I felt this was like kind of the only moment that they really kind of let it do that. And then of course, you know, it's weird because I would say, you know, when he puts the skull up and the embers, I'm like, oh yeah, that's beautiful and stuff. But like we keep saying, it also looks like it's out of a totally different kind of movie. Like, I'm like, I'm in this.
It looks like it's from like Planet of the Apes or something.
Yeah,
like,
I'm in this like
perfect
fantasy, fantastical film or whatever. But I mean, yeah, I overall I thought that scene worked very, very well. I wanted to bring up that you ended the spoiler-free section saying that people were going to be disappointed because there was a lot less zombie carnage, which should be followed up with, we get an increase of zombie penis in this one.
So I intentionally didn't mention it in the spoiler-free section because zombie dong has to be discussed. There was a discussion online, and once again, these people are sick. They were kind of looking at the trailer, and they were saying like, they're cheaping out. Everyone's wearing loincloths. This is so ridiculous. After 28 years, the clothes would be rotted away. And I'm just like, why do you want to see zombie penis anyways, is kind of my thoughts. And then I walk into this movie, and dude, there's dozens upon dozens upon dozens of zombie dongs swinging. They make sure the alpha's, you know, manhood is about as long as my forearm. And yeah, it's not something I needed to see. It's definitely something that'll stand out in my mind as what separates this movie from some other zombie movies that I've seen, funnily enough. But yeah, zombie dongs everywhere.
Danny Boyle, a man of the people. He knew what the people wanted. He knew what was going to get them talking on Reddit. And he's like, you got to give them what they want. That zombie dong. I mean, this is where I was talking about in the spoiler-free section of like things. So obviously, you know, we have a childbirth from an infected in this.
Yeah, a zombie, which they hand wave as the placenta is like a miraculous organ that obviously it's for filtering everything. And you get it very quickly. The mother like wipes away the blood off the baby's face, you know?
And I didn't really get it. I'm interested about how they conceived this child, what, you know, the medical conditions are, because, you know, in this series, sometimes they do the zombie like, oh, you know, you die, your body dies, then you kind of become this infected. They do in other entries play around with the idea of, oh, well, maybe you're just kind of infected. You're not dead, like you're infected.
Yeah, the way I remember it, and once again, I should remember it better. We watched it like 4 months ago. But in my mind, this was more of like a fast acting virus. Well, like when you get it, wasn't there like the scene where a little blood drops off like a piece of carnage up above when, God, I forget his name, but he's a great actor.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Shit. He's been in so many like Newfoundland things and whatnot anyways. But yeah, it like drops into his eye and then he like immediately starts turning, right? Yeah. So
I just, you know, can they get
You're getting into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, can they get a hard on? Can they conceive? What's up with the sperm? Yeah, what's going on here? I'm interested in the logistics of it.
Well, maybe you'll get that in the next one because I didn't expect to see so many dongs in this movie. Maybe we'll get like just some, you know,
did you enjoy
good
the
zombie fucking, you know?
Oh, dear Lord. Maybe, you know, and Danny Boyle.
That's why the next one's called The Bone Palace.
So did you enjoy, you know, Jodie Comer, like having that tender moment with the zombie mom where they hold hands? I
don't know.
Yeah.
Not really, if I'm being honest. Like, once again, I understand it conceptually. It's doing the whole idea of like, we're not so different, you and I. We just talked about that with Dangerous Animals.
Yeah.
But like they don't say this explicit speech, I don't think, in this. Although Ralph Fiennes' kind of whole thing is basically that he believes these people are not beyond saving, right? Like these, despite what they've gone, and basically the whole idea of this, you know, these, I guess this is probably the Bone Palace that they're talking about for the next one. I don't know what else would be the Bone Palace, but like all these kind of
that might be what the alpha calls his bedroom.
I just made that same joke like a minute ago and you ignored it. Oh my God. Anyways, basically the idea is that you can't tell if these are people or infected when you look at the bones. When you look at the skulls, when you look at it, they're not so different. So he believes deep down, somewhere in there is still humanity. And once again, I like this conceptually, but when I'm watching this scene and you're seeing this kind of zombie gnashing its teeth and freaking out and whatnot, and then it's delivering its baby, and we're like, okay, she's fine. And then she starts gnashing again. It's like, it's a tender moment, but it's also kind of weird. And I do agree that it prompts more questions of like, okay, did we just watch kind of Immaculate Conception? Is this child, this new Isla, going to be essentially like the Jesus of this world where, oh, she was born of a zombie, so, you know, she has blood, she's key to kind of the idea of an antidote or something to that effect, a vaccine. Maybe that will be the case in the next one, but when I was watching in this one, I understood how his mother in this scene, especially like with, you know, her cancer, her, you know, and her mental faculties kind of declining and being all over the place in the movie, how she would just see a woman who's clearly pregnant and in duress and want to help out. It was just kind of like, once again, some of the specifics of how this all happened, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a mess. And, you know, my other kind of issue I had with this is the alpha in it. I mean, this has been done. Obviously, my first experience with it was Land of the Dead. Shout out to Dennis Hopper and John Leguizamo, but, you know, the whole core conceit of that movie was like, oh, there's an alpha zombie. Oh, he learned to pick up a gun. Oh, he learns if he touches this thing, the gun goes off, and he can groan and tell other zombies where to go and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, maybe this is just a preference thing, but to me, I'm like a World War Z zombie kind of guy. Like, to me, the terrifying thing about zombies, especially when they can run, is I'm just like, I don't need an alpha. To me, what's terrifying is when just there's more and more and more, and there's just like piles of them, and it's just like the number is so overwhelming of them, where I don't know, my preference is I don't need a smart zombie that it's like, oh, I gotta, now my protagonists really have like someone to battle of the brains with the zombie.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't really interpreted it as that the alphas were so much smarter, I guess, when I was watching it. I am fine with the idea of an alpha. It's just I don't know if we needed 2 or 3 of them in the movie. Was kind of more so my idea. It's like the alpha, realistically, when everyone thinks of this movie, they're all going to think about the causeway scene.
Yeah.
And that's the one that we spend time with, essentially, that they're holed up inside of a building and you see him keeping watch out in the field. And he's the one that kind of shouts and sends the thralls forward to kind of come and attack the protagonists and whatnot. So it was the sort of thing where it's like, once that one was dead, I feel like that's enough for this movie in terms of the alpha. We don't need to bring back Samson as the one they call him, later in the movie and whatnot. For me, it was more so just, repeating similar beats. But also, how I interpreted the alpha, especially like once we got to like that second or third act, was that it was being driven on kind of its basic like evolutionary tendencies. Because what it felt like to me was essentially that they stole the alpha's baby and the alpha was angry. They killed his wife, stole his baby, and he was like, you know what? I'm coming to get my baby back. And it was the sort of thing that I just thought it was a little goofy, I guess, especially with how abruptly it happens, where Ralph Fiennes and Spike, they're hiding in that underground bunker, and the alpha just reaches through the ground and grabs Ralph Fiennes, and you're expecting to see him get his head ripped off and his spine ripped out, like has happened probably 3 or 4 times in the movie. That it was the sort of thing for me. It was just like, once again, that repetition.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned that there's a couple of different zombies in this movie, and we keep seeing them over again. It's the very gaunt, skinny ones that I kind of calls the thralls. They're the ones that are kind of under control of the alpha. And then there's like the ones that are like fat and sluggish, and they kind of crawl across the ground and eat whatever they come across. Those ones are kind of whatever. And then it's just the alpha, as we mentioned, which they describe in the movie that it takes 12 arrows to put them down. Even though they do put one down with far less than 12 arrows in the movie. I kind of wanted to see the ones with like all the arrows in them, like looking like a porcupine or something. So yeah, I don't have an issue with like the hierarchy and the zombies. And like, once again, they're clearly getting into the direction of the zombies are becoming more human. They're evolving. I wouldn't be surprised if you get a zombie that can communicate to some degree by the time we get to the second or third movie here. But I don't know if we need to go that far with it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a personal preference. So, I mean, some people, I think this will work for stuff like that. I did think it was funny, too, that, who's not a fan 28 Weeks Later? Danny Boyle. He's really trying hard to, like, not have that part of the lore of it.
So what are the specifics of the lore in there? Because I just haven't seen it in so long. I don't even know.
So I mean the whole premise of 28 Weeks Later is that the American army has now come in to deal with this virus. It's like Britain is lost, like the government is lost. It is now run by American army generals. Shout out to Idris Elba. He's the general.
Okay.
I forgot how many like big people were in that movie. They just weren't as big at the time. But yeah, it's like them, and then it's all about like, we think the whole plot of that movie is like they have a zone that's all cleaned up, people are living, then the infection gets in, and the military's like, we have to annihilate everybody, like civilians, everybody. That's the only way you're going to destroy this. And, they get around that a bit with this being kind of like this coastal island.
I was going to say, being this like rural area that's like off the coast, that's kind of this little utopia here, I guess.
Yeah, but like even with, we've got this like Swedish military member who I get he's young, but he talks about like where he is, this virus isn't anywhere except in this area, because he's talking about everyone's living life like normal, and now he's in the military.
Yeah, he has an iPhone that is just running out of batteries, and his girlfriend is the lock screen with lip filler.
That was funny. I did like that. I thought that was super funny. But yeah, and I'm like, well, this doesn't really make sense, because in this lore, Like America's already been here. They were here 28 weeks later after the first one. So like the world would know that the military's taken over this entire country.
I think they do know that it exists there because they're talking about how there's like the ships and the quarantine around that area. I think it was just, and I don't know how 28 weeks later ends. Are the Americans successful in eliminating the virus, or is it literally like they all die and they couldn't do it? Because if that's the case, then it still makes sense. It's just basically Britain is annexed from the rest of the world, and obviously this winds up just being a Brexit commentary, right? Where it's this isolationist attitudes where you isolate yourself from the rest of the world, and maybe it doesn't work out for the best. Is kind of what he's playing with.
28 weeks later ends with, because in that one they play with, there's a kid, he gets bitten. Nothing happens. It's his blood. His mom also. Nothing happens, but they both have different color eyes. And this is the key. The different color eyed kids. They seem to be immune. And then in the end, you know, Rosa Byrne is the star in that one. And is that her name Rose Byrne or Rose Byrne?
Rose Byrne, yeah. She typically plays moms in a bunch of movies nowadays.
She plays like the medical, you know, military person that gets them to the helicopter and these kids escape. And you're like, oh, this helicopter driver now has like the cure. This kid's blood is the cure. But like there's no mention of any, like, you know, because I'm like, well, the military had them. Like, so what happened to all that cure going on? And I mean, I guess you can be like, well, nothing happened, or civilization just like crumbled and stuff. But I just thought it was kind of funny because I if I'm remembering right, I only saw this yesterday. But they show, I think, like little clips of 28 weeks later in this. Like, I think there's clips of the sniper sniping people and like flashback stuff.
Oh, there might be. I probably interpreted that as just like more archival footage. Or
and that footage was from 28 weeks later. That was Jeremy Renner like shooting people on top of a building.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that was when they were discussing kind of like the exclusion zones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know if there's an internal logic here, I guess. It's clearly I just go, well, they failed, I guess, you know. Danny Boyle wasn't interested in contending
this happens.
Dealing with any of those ideas.
People coming back to their franchises and being like, I don't care about any of the sequels. Like, I'm just kind of going off my own stuff.
Couple of things I got to bring up before we wrap it up. Eventually we need to get to Jack O'Connell, but just goofy set pieces in the movie that like completely ripped me out of it. That made no sense. There's the part where Spike and Jamie, they're up in like the attic, and then he's having a dream or a nightmare about deer, and the CGI deer in this look absolutely terrible. But then it seems the house is actually getting destroyed by a stampede of deer running through it. And I didn't know, like, and once again, there's the vibe in this movie that you don't really know what is real, and it has this surreal aspect to it that I thought that was incredibly weird. And then also there's the Hell gas station, which is, you know, Shell, obviously, and the letter fell off. But they go into a gas station filled with gas, and you know, this Swedish guy shows up and blows up the whole gas station, all the gas, and all they do is they're just on the floor, and neither of them gets scorched at all. It was just
it didn't make any sense whatsoever.
There was just multiple sequences in this movie that I thought were put in there because they were cool, but don't really make any sort of sense. And once again, I understand we're discussing a zombie movie with alphas and all this nonsense, but it was just when you're betraying how like fire and explosions work, that sort of stuff winds up being a little bit strange to me.
One part I did like, we didn't talk about, I did like after they come back from, you know, Spike's, you know, them going out into the mainland, and Spike, like, I really did enjoy the, like, the whole party scene, and his dad, like, telling the stories.
Yeah. Telling tall tales, yeah. I like that as well, because obviously it's something we've seen in numerous movies, kind of the hero returns and tell these stories, and they all drink, and they, you know, all the stories are so outlandish. But in this movie, it's portrayed as like it's starting to be kind of hinting at that his dad isn't truthful. Like Spike is kind of fighting back against it. He wants to tell the true story because, you know, the true story is just as harrowing, or, you know, in his mind. But then he winds up like following his dad and seeing that he's cheating on his mom, and, you know, it causes all this drama and a rift between them. I liked all that stuff, like when they returned as well. I thought it was pretty good.
Newfoundland Bay residents, you think really would enjoy living in this place? I feel like there's like some underlying Newfoundland lore going on there.
Yeah, I can get that. Yeah, it felt like an old fisherman's hall, or, you know, something like that, like the community center, and rowdy, drinking, having a time. Yeah, just good stuff. So we haven't mentioned it yet. We mentioned Jack O'Connell. Well, you didn't even mention him by name, to tell you the truth, when you were going through
he's
the
a
cast.
legend. You got to build him up.
Exactly. But Jack O'Connell, he's playing what I can assume can only be the kid from the opening, obviously, because his name is Jimmy. He grabs his father's crucifix. The way the shadow and the light works in that scene is that the crosses are inverted, and when they're in that cold open. And this guy shows up, and he is like leading a Teletubby zombie killing group, and I was completely aghast at what I was seeing on screen.
Complete tonal shift.
Oh yeah, like whiplash. Like, this is the thing. Like, even if it doesn't work for you, the second half of this movie, or like part 2 and kind of part 3, if you want to break it down to like the mom's journey, and then kind of the spiritual journey with Ralph Fiennes, and kind of Spike finding his own way, you know, bringing Isla back to his village, it's kind of mounting up to kind of like this emotional, he coming of age, he's going to survive on his own, he's going to make his own way, he found his place in this, you know, fucked up world, and he's going to live probably by Ralph Fiennes' kind of some of his teachings. But he starts like walking down this meandering road and basically alerts a bunch of zombies nearby, and they start chasing him. And the decision to basically have him saved by, I don't know, a dozen different guys who look like Jimmy Seville and the Teletubbies mixed up that had a baby, to have them save him and be like, okay, fucking go. And I'll like jump down and have a weird zombie killing montage as a death metal version of the Teletubbies theme song is playing. I honestly didn't know what I was seeing. It was so confusing and such tonal whiplash to like what was literally happening 1 minute before that like it just feels like something out of a completely different movie. It almost feels like parody. It's insane what's happening there.
Well, yeah, this was like total Danny Boyle train spotting vibes, or like I felt like I could also be watching like a Guy Ritchie movie or something, like a classic Guy Ritchie movie. And the tonal shift was just totally off. It was really, really jarring. And this was another thing where I was like, it just seems so, and I know it's hard. Like, there's only so many of these zombie stories you can tell, but I'm like, this seems Walking Dead-ish. Like, okay,
yeah, I agree.
Now we're meeting a new group of people that are going to have a totally different vibe, and obviously are going to be problematic, and like, you know, obviously, you know, this guy's just fucking stuff up. We see a zombie earlier on that's got Jimmy carved into him, and
there's a piece of graffiti that I think it's like a Bible verse, and then Jesus is crossed out with Jimmy or something like that. So we know this is some sort of group or cult or you know, a zombie killing sect. To some degree, he's wearing an inverted cross, you know, that sort of thing. There's going to be something going here. But as I was just baffled as this is the end of the movie. I couldn't believe that, you know, 15 minutes earlier, everyone was crying at this, you know, woman being euthanized for brain cancer. And then, you know, we're here with like Teletubby zombie killing samurais. I like truly appalled by this. I fucking hated it. I thought that was the worst note possible to end the movie on. I stormed out of the theater, and it wasn't because of my KFC. I got to run away from that. It was just awful.
Yeah, I didn't like this whatsoever. I really don't. That's how appalled I was. I didn't really have a lot to say. I was like, this just doesn't work. One thing I did want to bring up before we get into rating it was I didn't bring up the music. I thought the music was interesting. I did like it, but I thought it was a really interesting choice to not have like that iconic 28 Days Later score, which 28 Weeks Later also utilized, and when they do use it in that, worked really well. And like, it's just like an iconic score. It's like, you're like, yeah, that's 28 Days Later. Like, that's, and it really works. And I think it works in a lot of the emotional tones of those first two movies. And I just thought it was really interesting that they didn't kind of keep that throughout these films, that, you know, they have that iconic score playing, and rather they went with Young Fathers is the people that did. They're like a folk rock, alt rock group that did all the music for this, which I did like it. I did actually like the music in this. I just was a little disappointed we didn't get like the main riff from the 28 Days Later that people associate with these films.
Yeah, the music honestly didn't stand out at all to me, so I can't even comment on it. I didn't miss the theme, or I didn't notice its absence. It was the sort of thing where I was like, okay,
it was just kind of weird because it was like folkish rock, but with like minimalist lyrics, like no lyrics.
Yeah,
more
I was
just
gonna say
and stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was definitely some licensed music in there with lyrics throughout, but it was just, once again, I can't really place even what genre it was now in retrospect. So anything else before we get into rating this?
No, I'm good.
So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give 28 years later?
I think I'm going to give it an okay. I think, you know, I have a lot of complaints about it. It's not like the dog shit. It's not the worst movie of all time. But it's just what I want, my taste in a zombie movie that just didn't really give me. And I've kind of said my piece about it, where I went in blind, not knowing this was a 3-parter, and, you know, maybe I'll feel differently about that when we get another part or whatever. And maybe as a whole, I'll be like, oh yeah, the first one actually really does work now that I have these other parts. But just judging this first part, I was like, I don't really care about this. I don't need this 3-part 28 years later story. And I'm not, other than Ray Fiennes, like, I'm not overly interested in any of these characters. Like, I have no affection for Spike. I thought he was fine, but I was just like, I don't really care. I don't need 2 movies about Spike. So at this point, I'm almost like, hey, if you want to make a second movie that's like just Jimmy, sure, I guess give that a try.
Oh, God.
And
no.
Just the Teletubbies theme playing throughout it.
Oof.
But yeah, I mean, I just think, I think the hype up, as we said at the beginning, the hype up from every critic saying movie of the year, and just, I'm like, there's no way this is better than Sinners. The Sinners was so much better, so much more competent. The story was so good. Like, I was like, this is a mess, and it's getting jammed in between 2 icons of 2025. You're getting Sinners, and then you're getting Megan 2.0. So
doesn't even have room to breathe.
Doesn't have room to breathe. But yeah, I'm gonna give it an okay. What about you?
Yeah, as I said, I liked it a little bit more than you, so I'm gonna lean on like a light yay for the movie.
I like this switch.
It's largely just because I did think that first section worked a lot for me. And a lot of what was going on in the second part, I at least thought was interesting, even though I was feeling like the repetition and I felt like the movie was getting a little bit long. I like the idea of kind of this subverting people's expectations of being a zombie movie and winding up being something with a little bit more emotion to it, I guess, even if what it's exploring is not novel. Like, life and death and rebirth and, you know, reasons to keep on living are not novel ideas that have not been explored in zombie media, but also in just like numerous other horror movies. I mean, horror as a genre often explores life and death because it's one of the few sorts of genres you see it happening all the time in the movies. I thought the acting was good across the board. I do agree that I think Alfie Williams is getting like insane praise. I thought he was good. He was not distracting. He certainly wasn't bad, but people are comparing his performance to that of the kid from Adolescence, and the kid from Adolescence is like fucking amazing. This kid was good. You know, he was good. I thought he gave a good performance. Aaron Taylor Johnson I liked as the father. I hope he does come back somehow in the sequel. Jodie Comer, even though she has easily the most difficult, role in the movie. She was good, and obviously Ralph Fiennes kills it. Jack O'Connell, no thank you. That was fucking awful. I don't I don't want to see that at all, but I am interested in Nia DaCosta's version of what the sequel winds up being.
Yeah.
Because I would assume a lot of this like obnoxious editing or like audacious style is kind of gonna go by the wayside because she's a little bit more of a traditional director than like Danny Boyle. Like I'm not going to be expecting this like punk rock feeling to the next one. Maybe it will. Maybe there'll be like a level of emulation. We'll have to see. But yeah, I liked a lot of what this movie did. It was just weird. It was just like way more weird than I expected, and a lot because it was so eccentric and strange. A lot of it didn't work for me. So yeah, it's gonna be a yay for me. This is something that I would like to rewatch maybe closer to the end of the year just to see if, now having my expectations in check makes me enjoy it a little bit more. But, for me right now, this is a yay. This is like a 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5 Letterboxd. It was good. I enjoyed it. And if you're not following us already on our socials, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky, pretty much on every social media at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds, Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, you mentioned some of the score for 28 Years Later. We never really talked about it with Dangerous Animals, but was anything of note gonna make the playlist?
I was thinking tonight I got some free time, so I might skim through, see if anything can make the playlist, see if there's any iconic pieces that get me going, or at least get me going like Tucker and Dangerous Animals, just rocking out in my undies.
Yeah, you got to put on Ooby Dooby.
Yeah, Ooby Dooby.
Has to make it.
But yeah, you can find out if I put anything on by going to Spotify, looking up the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned. Go in the bio, click the Linktree link. It'll take you directly there. We upload scores and licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So go give it a follow. We update it regularly, and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, the bitch is back. Of course, we're going to be talking about Megan 2.0. I got my tickets already for Thursday night. We'll see if I can actually make it, just with my work schedule and whatnot. But yeah, I'm planning to see that before the weekend. So
yeah, I think Friday will be my day.
Nice. So yeah, next time on the show, we'll be covering Megan 2.0. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.